Hello, Will. It's Nana here. I'm going to read you another story. And this story is called The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrice Potter. Beatrice Potter is the name of the lady who wrote the book. And it says illustrated by David McPhail. And that's the man who drew all the pictures in the book. Before we read this book, I wanted just to tell you a little bit about rabbits and why they sometimes will get into gardens and eat things in the garden. Rabbits love lettuce and carrots and parsley and celery and all the things that people grow, vegetables that people grow in their gardens. And so rabbits will sometimes sneak into gardens and eat some of the food that people are growing. And this is a story about how Peter Rabbit got himself into a garden and he got in trouble. And we're going to talk about what happened. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. There he is. There he is. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Let's see if we can see them. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 little rabbits and a mommy. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very large fir tree. There they are. Looks like their mom's reading to them. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but do not go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor." Ooh. She's warning all 4 of the little bunnies. "Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and she went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden, and he squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. Parsley can make your tummy feel better. But round the end of the cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Uh-oh. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and he ran after Peter, shouting, "Stop, thief, stop!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten his way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and then he lost the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and he went faster so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net. He got caught by his large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost, and he shed big tears. But sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. That means they told him to use his strength and get out of there. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop over the top of Peter. But Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful place to hide if it didn't have so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn over the flower pots carefully, looking under each one. Presently, Peter sneezed, "Ka-choo!" And Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running anyway, so he went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, but he did not have the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting inside the can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. You see that lock? And there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Oh, so sad. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. There she is. She sat very still. Do you see the fish? But now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes. That's what a hoe is. That's a tool that you use in gardens. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and he climbed onto the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. There's the gate. You think Peter will get there? Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow, and he started running as fast as he could go along a straight path behind some blackberry bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and he was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. I don't think those crows are scared of that scarecrow. What do you think? He was so tired he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole, and he closed his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed. She made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Ask your daddy to tell you about a bunny that he had when he was a little boy, and the bunny's name was Flopsy. We named the bunny after one of Peter's sisters. Maybe your daddy can tell you all about our little Flopsy. So I hope you like this book, and I will record another one for you tomorrow. I love you, sweetie. Bye-bye now. Good night.